A drifter rode into Copper Basin with a secret worth more than every ranch in the valley, but the first person to help him had no idea who she was feeding. A chair crashed across the saloon floor. Men surged toward the door as snow whipped through the open entrance. Ruby Bennett froze, a bowl of hot stew trembling in her hands. Near the hitching rail outside, a dust-covered cowboy stood beside a tired horse, saying nothing while angry voices rose around him. Then someone spotted the silver badge hidden beneath his coat, and the room went silent. But what did that badge mean? And why did he look ready to disappear before anyone could ask? If this opening pulls you in, let me know where you're watching from. Late autumn always arrived early in Copper Basin. The first cold winds came down from the Bitterstone Mountains before most people were ready for them. They swept through the valley, rattling loose shutters, bending dry grass, and carrying the smell of pine and distant snow. Ruby Bennett felt those winds every evening on her walk to the back door of the Silver Lantern Saloon. She was 27 years old and had lived most of her life working for other people. By sunrise, she scrubbed pots. By noon, she washed glasses. By evening, she carried trays through clouds of cigar smoke and laughter. When the saloon finally closed, she slept in a narrow room behind the kitchen. The room held a small iron bed, a wash basin, and a wooden chair with one uneven leg. It wasn't much, but it was hers. That evening, the wind hit harder than usual. The front windows of the saloon rattled in their frames. Men crowded around the stove near the poker tables. A ranch hand complained that winter was arriving too soon. Another man laughed and said, winter never cared what anybody wanted. Ruby was carrying a tray of coffee cups when the front door opened. Cold air rushed inside. Conversation slowed. A stranger stood in the doorway. His coat was covered with trail dust. His hat looked older than the season. His boots had seen too many miles. Behind him, tied to the hitching rail outside, stood a tired bay horse with ribs showing beneath its coat. Nobody moved. The stranger removed his hat slowly. "Evening," he said. His voice was calm, not weak, not begging, just tired. Clyde Mercer looked up from behind the bar. Clyde owned the Silver Lantern, a thick man with heavy shoulders and small eyes that missed very little. He glanced at the stranger once, then looked away. "We're not running a charity." Several men chuckled. The stranger remained where he was. "I only need a meal. You need money first." More laughter followed. Ruby watched quietly. The man didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't complain. He simply nodded once, then turned slightly as if preparing to leave. Something about that bothered her. Maybe it was the horse outside. Maybe it was the exhaustion in his eyes. Or maybe it was because she knew what hunger looked like. Without saying anything, she walked back into the kitchen. Old Martha, the cook, looked up. "What are you doing?" Ruby reached for a bowl. "Taking out supper. That drifter can't pay." Ruby filled the bowl anyway. Stew, potatoes, carrots, a thick piece of bread, enough to warm a man after a cold ride. When she carried it into the dining room, heads turned. Clyde frowned. Ruby ignored him. She placed the bowl on an empty table near the stove. The stranger looked at it, then at her. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you." That was all. No speech, no dramatic gratitude. Just two simple words. The room laughed. One rancher shook his head. "Looks like the drifter found himself an angel." More laughter followed. Ruby returned to work without answering. But later, while collecting empty cups, she noticed something. The stranger wasn't rushing through the meal. He ate slowly, like someone who respected every bite. By closing time, he was still there. The bowl sat empty beside him. When Ruby stepped outside with a bucket of wash water, she found him checking his horse. The animal lowered its head weakly. Ruby disappeared into the stable and returned with a small sack of oats. The stranger looked surprised. You don't have to do that. The horse looks worse than you do. A faint smile touched his face, the first one she had seen. That's saying something. For the first time, Ruby smiled back. The wind pushed across the street between them. Then she went inside. The next morning, she learned his name. Cole. Just Cole. No family name offered. No history. No explanations. Over the following days, he stayed around Copper Basin, sometimes helping unload freight wagons, sometimes repairing fences for ranchers, sometimes disappearing into the hills before sunrise. He never seemed to stay in one place very long. Yet somehow, he always ended up back at the Silver Lantern. One afternoon, Ruby noticed blood on his hand, a deep scrape across his palm. He claimed it came from barbed wire. The wound looked painful. He didn't complain. After supper, she found a bandage and some alcohol. Sit down. Cole looked at the supplies. I've had worse. I'm sure you have. He sat anyway. The kitchen was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. Ruby cleaned the cut. Cole never flinched. Most men did. You ride much? She asked. Enough. Where from? Lots of places. That answer should have sounded suspicious. Instead, it sounded lonely. Ruby wrapped the bandage and tied it carefully. There. Cole looked at the neat knot. You always take care of strangers? Only the ones bleeding on my tables. That earned another smile. A real one this time. Days passed. The valley continued preparing for winter. Wagons carried firewood. Cowboys repaired fences. Smoke rose from ranch chimneys each morning. And Ruby began noticing something strange. Cole knew things. Too many things. He knew which ranches had changed hands 10 years earlier. He knew old property boundaries. He knew family names most newcomers never learned. Once she heard him correct a rancher about a water rights dispute from years ago. The rancher stared. How'd you know that? Cole simply shrugged. Ruby remembered the look on the man's face. It stayed with her. One evening, she carried coffee into Clyde Mercer's office. The door was partly open. Inside sat Clyde and a sharply dressed man wearing a black coat, Horace Finch, the lawyer. Ruby recognized him immediately. She lowered her eyes and stepped forward. Neither man noticed her at first. Sign before the end of winter, Horace was saying. They won't have a choice. And the debt papers? Clyde asked. Horace smiled. They'll hold up long enough. Ruby set the coffee down quietly. She wasn't trying to listen, but she heard one more sentence. By spring, those ranches belong to us. The room fell silent. Both men finally noticed her. Horace stopped talking. Clyde's eyes narrowed slightly. Ruby left without a word. Outside, cold air hit her face. Something about that conversation felt wrong, but she couldn't explain why. A week later, after closing time, Ruby walked home along the edge of town. The moon hung low over the valley. Wind pushed through the dry grass. She was halfway to the back road when she saw a fire. Not a campfire. Something larger. She stopped. A small rancher's shack stood beyond the creek. Flames climbed into the night sky. 2 riders sat nearby. Watching. Not helping. Watching. Ruby stepped behind a cottonwood tree. Her heart beat harder. One rider turned slightly. Moonlight touched his face. Just enough. Just long enough. Ruby froze. Because she recognized him. Clyde Mercer, the owner of the Silver Lantern, standing beside the burning shack, watching it burn, and doing nothing. The fire crackled louder. A roof beam collapsed. Sparks flew into the dark sky. Ruby remained hidden behind the tree, unable to move, unable to understand what she had just seen. And for the first time since the stranger named Cole had arrived in Copper Basin, She felt that something much larger was happening beneath the surface of the valley. Something dangerous. Something that had already begun. Ruby barely slept that night. The image stayed with her long after the fire died. Clyde Mercer standing near the burning shack. Watching. Not helping. Not calling for water. Just watching. By dawn, a thin frost covered the grass outside Copper Basin. The mountains wore pale streaks of snow near their peaks, and smoke drifted from ranch chimneys across the valley. Ruby poured coffee into tin cups behind the silver lantern counter. She kept expecting Clyde to say something, anything. But he acted as though nothing had happened, as though the family whose shack burned had simply vanished from the world. That bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Near noon, the front door opened. Cole stepped inside. Dust covered his coat again. His horse was tied outside with a fresh blanket across its back. Ruby noticed little things. She had begun noticing them without meaning to. The blanket wasn't cheap. The saddle had been repaired recently using quality leather. His boots were worn, but they had once been expensive. Nothing matched the story of a drifting cowboy looking for odd jobs. Cole removed his hat. Morning. Morning. That was all. Yet both smiled slightly before returning to work. Old Martha noticed. She noticed everything. Later that afternoon, Ruby carried a sack of potatoes behind the kitchen and found Cole repairing a section of loose fencing near the stable. He worked carefully. Not quickly. Not carelessly. Like a man protecting something that belonged to him. You know fencing? Ruby asked. Cole glanced up. A little. She laughed softly. That doesn't look like a little. Cole rested his hammer against the post. My father believed fences should outlive the men who built them. Ruby paused. That answer sounded honest. Maybe too honest. For a moment she wondered what kind of father had taught him such things. Before she could ask, Cole changed the subject. How long have you worked here? 5 years. You ever think about leaving? She looked toward the valley. A freight wagon rolled slowly down Main Street. 2 children chased a dog through the dust. I think about it. But? Ruby smiled faintly. But thinking is cheaper than traveling. Cole looked at her for a second longer than necessary, then lowered his eyes. Neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. That surprised both of them. A few days later, Ruby walked to Willow Creek carrying 2 empty buckets. The creek sat beyond town where cottonwoods lined the water. She found Cole there trying to free a young horse tangled in abandoned wire fencing. The animal fought nervously. Cole spoke softly to it. No shouting, no force, just patience. Ruby set down the buckets and stepped forward. The horse settled slightly. Together, they worked the wire loose. When the animal finally pulled free, it trotted away across the grass. Cole watched it disappear. Most people would have cut the wire. You didn't. No. Ruby looked at him. Why? Cole shrugged. Sometimes something scared doesn't need force. It just needs time. The answer lingered between them. Ruby wasn't sure whether he meant the horse or something else. As winter edged closer, they began crossing paths more often. Not because either planned it. At least that was what they told themselves. She repaired a tear in his coat. He fixed a leak above the saloon's rear storage room. She saved him a plate of supper when work ran late. He brought back a lost mule belonging to one of the ranch hands. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind that slowly become important before anyone notices. One evening, Ruby was carrying a crate behind the saloon when voices stopped her. 3 drunken men stood near the alley. They weren't dangerous, just loud and careless. One stepped into her path. Another laughed. Ruby tried moving around them. The man shifted again. Before she could speak, another voice came from behind. She's trying to get through. The alley fell quiet. Cole stood near the stable door. His expression remained calm. The men exchanged looks. One muttered something under his breath. Another stepped forward. The situation lasted only seconds. But those seconds felt longer. Cole didn't back away. The men finally chose the easier path. They left. Grumbling, embarrassed. When the alley emptied, Ruby released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Cole said. I did. For a moment, neither looked away. Then Ruby lowered her eyes first. Not because she wanted to, because she needed to. Something had shifted. Something neither was ready to name. A week later, snow clouds gathered over Bitterstone Mountains. Business slowed. The saloon felt quieter. That afternoon, Ruby was sweeping the upstairs hallway when she noticed a coat hanging outside one of the rented rooms. Cole's coat. A silver object rested partly inside the pocket. She wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally. The item caught the light. Ruby paused, then carefully pulled it free. A silver badge. Heavy. Expensive. Not the sort of thing owned by a drifting cowboy. Words were engraved across its surface. Turner Territorial Holdings. Ruby stared. The name struck her immediately. Everyone in Copper Basin knew it. The Turner family had once controlled more land than anyone in the valley. People still talked about them, especially the heir. The young man believed dead after an ambush 8 years earlier. Ruby looked toward the empty hallway. Then back at the badge. The cold feeling that traveled through her chest had nothing to do with winter, because for the first time, she realized the man she had been feeding, helping, and trusting might not be who he claimed to be at all. And suddenly, every strange detail, every answer, every silence, every piece that never quite fit, began falling into place, one by one. Ruby returned the silver badge to Cole's coat exactly where she had found it. Then she walked downstairs. Her hands continued working. Her mind did not. She poured coffee, collected empty plates, wiped tables. But every time she looked toward the front room, she saw him differently. Not as a drifting cowboy. Not as a man sleeping in rented rooms. Not as the quiet stranger who thanked her for a bowl of stew. She saw questions. Questions she could no longer ignore. 3 days passed before she spoke to him again. 3 long days. The first winter storm of the season rolled across Copper Basin during that time. Snow dusted the rooftops. Wagons moved slower. Ranchers hurried home before dark. Late one afternoon, Ruby found Cole standing outside the stable, brushing snow from his horse. The valley behind him had turned pale beneath the gathering clouds. You never told me your last name. Cole stopped brushing. Only for a second. Then he continued. I suppose I didn't. Ruby folded her arms. No, you didn't. Silence settled between them. Not angry, not yet. Just heavy. Finally, Cole lowered the brush. His eyes met hers. What brought this on? Ruby reached into her apron pocket. The silver badge appeared in her hand. Cole's expression changed immediately. Not panic, not fear. Something closer to resignation. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved through the stable yard. A loose sign creaked above the blacksmith shop. Then Ruby asked quietly, Who are you? Cole looked past her toward the mountains, toward the valley, toward land that seemed to stretch forever. When he finally answered, his voice was lower than usual. My name is Cole Turner. I figured that part out. A faint smile touched his face. It vanished quickly. My father owned most of this territory. Ruby felt her stomach tighten. The words made everything real. Owned. Cole nodded. Before he died. And after? His gaze drifted away. People believed there was nobody left to claim it. Ruby stared at him. The stories flooded back. Old newspaper clippings. Conversations at the saloon. The heir who vanished after an ambush. The family everyone assumed was gone forever. The Turner name. Suddenly she understood. You. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence did it for him. Ruby looked away first. The cold felt sharper now. Not because of the weather, because of disappointment. Days passed. Neither spoke much. Cole still came to the saloon. Ruby still served meals. But something had changed. The easy smiles disappeared. The comfortable pauses vanished. A distance had settled between them. One evening, Cole placed a few coins beside his empty plate. Ruby picked them up, then quietly pushed them back. You forgot these. Cole looked at her, no. The word hung there. He understood exactly what she meant. She wasn't returning money. She was returning trust. That hurt more than he expected. Meanwhile, trouble continued spreading through Copper Basin. More ranchers received notices. More families complained about debts they didn't understand. And Clyde Mercer seemed unusually cheerful. One snowy afternoon, Ruby carried a tray toward the office hallway. The door stood partly open. Voices drifted out. Clyde Mercer, Horace Finch, again. The Turner problem won't matter. Are you sure? Horace asked. Nobody listens to ghosts. The two men laughed. Ruby paused. Then a floorboard creaked beneath her boot. The voices stopped instantly. She hurried away. But it was already too late. Someone had noticed. The next morning, everything exploded. A shout echoed through the saloon before breakfast. Clyde Mercer stood in the center of the room holding a leather money pouch. Customers gathered immediately. Ranch hands, travelers, teamsters, everyone. Clyde's face burned red with outrage. Found this in her room. Ruby froze. What? The missing payroll money. The room turned toward her. A few people stepped back. Others whispered. Ruby stared at the pouch. She had never seen it before. That's not mine. Clyde laughed. Funny place for it to appear then. The sheriff arrived minutes later. An uncomfortable man named Walter Briggs. He examined the pouch, counted the money, looked at Ruby, looked at Clyde. Ruby could already see what was happening. Nobody asked her side first. Nobody wanted to. The room had chosen. The decision sat in their eyes. She felt it, like a door quietly closing. By noon, she sat inside the small town jail. A narrow cot, iron bars, one blanket. Outside the window, snow drifted across Main Street. Hours passed. The jail remained silent. Then footsteps approached. Ruby knew who it was before she looked up. Cole. He stood outside the cell, hat in hand, snow melting on his shoulders. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, he said softly, Ruby. She didn't answer. Look at me. She stared at the wall. The silence lasted so long that even Cole seemed to lose words. When she finally spoke, her voice remained calm, almost too calm. You lied. Cole closed his eyes briefly. I should have told you. Yes. I wanted to. She laughed once. A small sound. Not happy, not angry, just tired. Funny thing about wanting. Cole stepped closer. The bars remained between them. I can prove you're innocent. Ruby turned toward him for the first time. Her eyes were bright but steady. Then why didn't you trust me with the truth? The question landed harder than any accusation. Cole had no answer. Not one good enough. Not one she deserved. The silence stretched. Then heavy footsteps entered the jail. Sheriff Briggs, 3 deputies, half the town behind them. Confused voices filled the room. Cole straightened. Something changed in his expression. A decision. Long delayed. Finally made. He reached into his coat. Removed a folded document. Then another. And another. Official seals gleamed beneath the lantern light. The sheriff frowned. What is this? Cole looked around the crowded room. At Clyde Mercer. At Horace Finch. At every person who had spent years believing a dead man could never return. Then he spoke clearly. My name is Cole Turner. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I am the legal heir to Turner Territorial Holdings. The room went completely silent. Outside, snow continued falling over Copper Basin. Inside, an entire town stopped cold, because the dead man had just walked back into their lives, and everything was about to change. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Snow drifted past the jailhouse windows. The stove crackled softly in the corner. Sheriff Briggs stared at the documents in his hands. One carried the territorial seal. Another contained property records. A third bore signatures that most people in Copper Basin had only seen on legal notices and land contracts. The room seemed smaller than before. Clyde Mercer was the first to recover. He forced out a laugh. A convenient story. But the confidence in his voice had already begun to crack. Cole met his gaze. You've spent years acting like nobody would come back. The words landed hard. Nobody missed the color leaving Clyde's face. Horace Finch stepped forward quickly. This changes nothing. Yet even he sounded uncertain. Sheriff Briggs looked from the papers to Cole, then back again. Finally, he cleared his throat. I'll be reviewing every document. Clyde opened his mouth. The sheriff raised a hand. Every document. That ended the argument. An hour later, Ruby walked out of the jail. The snow had stopped. The sky above Copper Basin was turning pale gold with sunset. Cole stood near the boardwalk waiting. Ruby didn't stop. She simply walked past him. Ruby. She kept moving. Ruby, please. That word made her pause. Not because she forgave him, because she had never heard him sound so tired. Slowly she turned. Cole removed his hat. The wind pushed lightly through his dark hair. I never meant to lie to you. Ruby looked at him for a long moment. No. Then what exactly were you doing? Cole had no answer that sounded good enough. Neither did she. The silence stretched. Finally, Ruby shook her head. I trusted you. Those 3 words hurt more than anger. Then she walked away. Cole remained standing alone in the fading light. The following week felt longer than the entire winter. News spread quickly through Copper Basin. Every ranch, every feed store, every church gathering. People spoke of little else. Cole Turner was alive. The rightful owner had returned. Some celebrated. Others worried. A few disappeared altogether. Meanwhile, Ruby packed her belongings. There wasn't much. 2 dresses, a Bible, a photograph of her parents, a quilt old Martha had helped her sew years earlier. The room behind the kitchen looked smaller each day. She folded everything carefully. 1 box at a time. 1 goodbye at a time. Old Martha found her packing late one evening. You leaving? Ruby nodded. Where? Maybe Helena. Maybe somewhere farther. Martha sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Running from him? Ruby smiled sadly. No. Then after a pause, she added, running from what I hoped he was. Outside, winter deepened across the valley. Inside the silver lantern, Clyde Mercer grew desperate. His business was shrinking. Questions were being asked. Sheriff Briggs had started reviewing land records. Several ranchers had come forward with complaints. The walls were closing in, and Clyde knew exactly who could destroy everything. Ruby Bennett. She had overheard conversations. She had seen things. She could testify. One snowy night, she climbed into a stagecoach heading toward the train depot south of town. The road followed the edge of Bitterstone Canyon. Only 4 passengers rode inside: a ranch widow, a traveling salesman, an older miner, and Ruby. The horses moved steadily through the darkness. Lantern light swayed gently overhead. Ruby rested her hand on the small suitcase beside her. For the first time in weeks, she felt calm. That feeling lasted less than an hour. The stagecoach suddenly stopped. Voices echoed outside. The driver argued with someone. Then silence. The door opened. Cold air rushed inside. 2 men stood there. Neither looked familiar. But Ruby immediately understood. One of them spoke quietly. "Miss Bennett, you're coming with us." The widow gasped. The salesman looked away. Nobody moved. Ruby tightened her grip on the suitcase. "No." The man sighed. "As you wish." The next few moments passed in confusion. Raised voices, snow, darkness, the stagecoach rocking slightly. Then Ruby found herself outside beneath a sky full of winter stars. A horse waited nearby. So did several riders. Far in the distance, she heard another sound. Hoofbeats, fast, very fast. One rider turned. Another cursed. The sound grew louder, closer. Then a familiar voice shattered the night. "Ruby! Cole!" The canyon exploded into motion. Horses surged forward. Men scattered. Snow kicked into the air. Lantern light flashed across rock walls and frozen ground. Cole rode at the front of several cowboys from nearby ranches. Not hired guns. Men who trusted him. Men who had known the Turner family for years. The chase thundered through Bitterstone Canyon, past frozen creek beds, past abandoned mining trails, past cliffs that swallowed moonlight. Ruby held tightly to the saddle as the riders pushed forward. The cold burned her cheeks. The wind stole her breath. Minutes felt like hours. Then suddenly it ended. The men pursuing her vanished into the darkness, abandoning the effort as ranch hands closed in from both sides. Silence returned slowly. Only the sound of horses breathing remained. Cole dismounted immediately. For several seconds, neither spoke. Snow drifted softly around them. The world seemed very still. Then Cole stepped closer. Not enough to touch her, just enough to be heard. "I thought I'd lost you." Ruby looked away. Cole swallowed hard. The next words appeared to cost him more than anything he had said before. "I wasn't afraid of losing the land." His voice was rough. "I wasn't afraid of losing the Turner name." Ruby slowly turned back. Cole's eyes never left hers. "I was afraid of losing you." The canyon fell silent again. No wind, no movement, only those words hanging between them. For a moment, Ruby couldn't speak. She had waited so long to hear the truth, yet now that it stood before her, she didn't know what to do with it. Cole took another breath. "I love you, Ruby." No grand speech followed. No promises. No rehearsed words. Just the truth, simple and exposed beneath a winter sky. Ruby felt her heart pull in 2 directions at once, toward him and away from the hurt he had caused. She looked at him, really looked at him, then lowered her eyes. Cole waited. The snow continued falling, but Ruby gave no answer. Not yes, not no. Nothing at all. And somehow that silence hurt more than either of them expected. The ride back to Copper Basin was quiet. Snow covered the road in pale silver beneath the moonlight. The cowboys who had helped rescue Ruby rode ahead, giving her and Cole space. No one spoke. The canyon winds had settled. Only the sound of hooves remained. Ruby kept her eyes forward. Cole never asked for an answer again. Not that night. Not the next morning. And not the week that followed. Winter settled fully over Copper Basin. The sheriff's office became crowded with paperwork. Ranchers arrived carrying receipts, contracts, and notices they had received from Horace Finch over the past few years. What had once seemed like isolated complaints began fitting together. One ranch, then another, then 5, then 12. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Sheriff Briggs spent long evenings reviewing records beneath oil lamps. For the first time, people were asking questions Clyde Mercer could not answer. Ruby rented a small room above Mrs. Dawson's general store after leaving the Silver Lantern. The room overlooked Main Street. Each morning she woke before sunrise. Each evening she watched snow gather along the boardwalks. Life felt different now. Not easier, just different. Cole visited only once. He knocked gently. When Ruby opened the door, he removed his hat. "I came to make sure you're all right." She nodded. "I am." He glanced toward the room behind her. Simple furniture. A small stove, 2 books, a sewing basket. Nothing more. "You need anything?" "No." Cole accepted the answer. He didn't argue, didn't offer money, didn't offer solutions. For some reason, Ruby appreciated that more than she expected. Before leaving, he paused. "The hearing is next Thursday." She nodded. "I'll be there." Then he left. No dramatic goodbye, no attempt to change her mind. Just respect. The church hall filled before sunrise on the day of the hearing. Copper Basin had never seen anything like it. Ranchers stood shoulder to shoulder with store owners. Widows sat beside cattlemen. Even travelers passing through town found seats along the back wall. Snow fell steadily outside. Inside, the old church felt warm from the iron stoves burning near the entrance. Clyde Mercer sat near the front, Horace Finch beside him. Neither man looked comfortable. Ruby arrived quietly. She took a seat near the center aisle. A few moments later, Cole entered. Their eyes met briefly. Then both looked away. The hearing lasted hours. Documents were examined, signatures compared, witnesses called. One by one, the truth surfaced. Several ranchers testified they had signed papers they never fully understood. Others described debts that seemed to grow without explanation. Then Ruby stood. The room fell silent. She walked to the front carrying a folded piece of paper. The receipt she had found months earlier near Clyde's office. A small thing, easy to overlook, but it connected dates, payments, names. It connected everything. Sheriff Briggs studied it carefully, then compared it against other records. His expression hardened. By afternoon, the outcome was no longer in doubt. Clyde Mercer lowered his head for the first time all day. Horace Finch removed his spectacles and stared at the floor. Years of deception had finally collapsed. Outside, church bells rang as people stepped into the snowy afternoon. The case was over. The stolen land would be returned. The fraudulent contracts voided. Copper Basin could finally begin again. Yet when people spoke afterward, they weren't discussing Clyde Mercer. They were talking about Ruby, the woman who refused to stay silent, the woman who stood up when it would have been easier to leave. That evening, the town felt lighter, as if a storm had finally moved on. Weeks passed. Winter slowly loosened its grip. Snowbanks shrank beside the roads. The creek began moving again. Mud returned to the wagon paths. Spring arrived one careful day at a time. Ruby used her savings to lease a small building beside the stagecoach road. The structure had once been a bakery, then a barber shop, then nothing at all. Now it belonged to her. She scrubbed the floors herself, painted the walls herself, built tables from reclaimed wood with help from old Martha and a local carpenter. A sign appeared above the door. Ruby's table. The first customer arrived before the paint had fully dried. A tired ranch hand. Then 2 travelers. Then 3 wagon drivers. Word spread quickly. People said the coffee was strong. The stew was better. But mostly, they said everyone was treated the same inside. That mattered, especially in a place like Copper Basin. Late one afternoon near the end of spring, Ruby was wiping down a table beside the front window when she heard a familiar sound. Horse hooves. Slow. Steady. She looked up. Cole Turner had arrived. He tied his horse outside, removed his hat, then entered. The restaurant was nearly empty. Only one traveler sat near the stove. Cole crossed the room and stopped beside a table. The same table nearest the window. The same place where sunlight touched the wood during late afternoons. Without saying a word, he sat down. Ruby walked over carrying a bowl of stew. She placed it in front of him, exactly the way she had done months earlier. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Cole slid a small wooden box across the table. Not fancy, not expensive looking, just polished cedar. Ruby opened it. Inside rested a ring. Beside it lay a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was familiar. The first meal was yours. The rest of my life can be too, if you want it. Ruby read the words twice, then once more. The restaurant had gone completely quiet. Even the traveler near the stove seemed afraid to move. Cole looked at her. Not with confidence, not with certainty. With hope. Simple hope. The kind that leaves a man vulnerable. Ruby closed the note carefully, then looked at the bowl of stew. Steam curled upward, just like that first night, just like the beginning. A smile appeared before she could stop it. She looked back at him. You're late, cowboy. For one brief second, Cole simply stared. Then he laughed. A real laugh. The first one she had heard in months. Ruby extended her hand. Cole took it gently and slipped the ring onto her finger. No applause followed. No grand celebration. Just 2 people sitting across a table, choosing each other. Years later, people would remember that moment. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. 10 years passed. Copper Basin grew. New fences crossed the valley. New homes appeared. The old wounds slowly healed. Ruby's table became the busiest place in town. 3 children often ran between the tables. A boy and 2 girls. Their laughter filled the room nearly every evening. One winter night, long after sunset, the front door opened. Cold wind entered with a young cowboy. His coat was thin, his face tired. His horse looked hungry. A few customers glanced up. One man frowned. Ruby recognized the look immediately. Before anyone could speak, she carried a bowl of hot stew to the young traveler. She set it down gently. Eat first. The cowboy looked surprised, then grateful. Across the room, Cole stood beside the stove. Older now, a little grayer, still watching her the same way. Their eyes met. Neither needed to say a word. Outside, snow drifted softly across Copper Basin. Inside, warmth filled the room. And in that quiet moment, the circle finally closed. Because everything that followed had begun with one simple act. A bowl of stew, given to a stranger on a cold autumn night. That was all Ruby meant to offer. Not a future. Not a love story. Not a family. Just a warm meal to someone who looked like he needed one. And maybe that's what stays with me most about this story. The biggest moments in our lives rarely announce themselves when they arrive. They often look ordinary at first. A small kindness, a door held open, a hand extended when someone else would have turned away. Imagine yourself standing where Ruby once stood. You've been disappointed, lied to, hurt by someone you trusted. Would you have found the courage to open your heart again? Or imagine being Cole, carrying old wounds for so long that protecting yourself became easier than believing in love. Life has a way of leaving scars on all of us. Yet stories like theirs remind us that healing doesn't always come through grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through patience, through forgiveness, through someone choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Maybe that's the real gift of love. Not finding a perfect person, but finding someone who sees the truth of who you are and chooses you anyway. I'd love to know, what moment from Ruby and Cole's journey stayed with you the most? And if you enjoy stories about second chances, enduring love, and the unexpected ways hope finds its way back into a person's life, I hope you'll join me again. There are still many trails ahead, many hearts waiting to be discovered, and many stories waiting beside the next campfire.